following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
We are ready for Belly Up Fantasy Live this morning, everybody. It is the draft season is officially started now. Scott Fishbowl is underway, which means that it is officially fantasy football draft season. We are going to switch it into high gear here at Belly Up Fantasy Live. But first, let's get ourselves started, and we'll bring in Kevin and get things going here. Welcome in.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. Game time. Good morning, everybody. I am Chase Thornton, coming to you, as always, from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar here, and it is time for Belly Up Fantasy Live. Now, we are going to talk today. We'll touch on our normal news items like everybody does, but today we're going to talk about draft strategies and draft etiquette. Like, basically, how do you conduct yourself during the draft on draft day? Because I think that's something that not a lot of people give a ton of thought to. I think a lot of us look forward to the draft every year, and especially our home drafts, our live drafts. It's exciting. Drafting is one of the best parts of fantasy football. But how do we actually conduct ourselves in drafts? So we're going to touch on that today. But again, I am not alone. We're going to bring in our good friend here, Mr. Kevin Wilson down there in Texas. How we doing, Kevin?
We are doing good down here. And as we were talking about pregame, we're in the midst of the high pressure heat dome. So yeah, we are just trying to survive and not melt when we go outside. But so far, so good. And always glad to be here, and always glad to be talking about some football. So glad to be here.
Yeah, there you have it. I don't know. Like, yeah, we were talking pregame. I don't know if everybody could see that. This is well, there we go. There we go. You see the little red mark there?
I do see that.
Yeah, that's supposedly like a wave of the smoke and, I don't know, atmospheric disruption, I guess you could say, coming down from Canada here. We've talked about it before. I'm in Wisconsin, so we're right next door to Canada. We're neighbors. We can see each other. And yeah, the air quality down here, I don't know if you can hear my voice. I'm all dried out, so I'm going to actually crack one open and lube up here. It's definitely a coffee bender type of morning for me today. But yeah, it's just the air quality up here. So you got heat down there. Mm-hmm. I got smoke up here. So weird times. We're
supposed to have heat, this time of year.
Texas
smoke
is supposed to be hot. Yeah.
Right. Smoke shouldn't be happening anywhere. So that's,
yeah.
Kinda...
And again, we feel for our friends up in Canada, especially too, that, that are actually dealing with this up in their literal neck of the woods.
Especially since I understand a lot of that was self-inflicted.
Yeah, well, either way, I wish we could get something going on to end it for everybody's sake. But as we said, yeah, hey, we're here to talk about football. I'm gonna grab my coffee bender here, lube up, and get ourselves ready to go here. So. Again, we've talked about it before. We're in a slow period in terms of NFL news, overall.
Yeah, but it's going to speed up because in 2 days, 2 days, rookie camp opens.
Yep, we've got
depending on what team you're talking about. Then about a week later, everybody should be.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel, folks.
And it's not that far away either. So
no, not at all. And in fact, tomorrow, and we're going to talk about this with several of these gentlemen here, but tomorrow is the deadline for franchise tags to be signed.
That's right.
Okay,
so Saquon Barkley in particular.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
So let's start there. Tomorrow is the franchise deadline for people who have been franchised and transition tagged and all that to sign their deal. Right now, there are 3 guys that affects: Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Evan Ingram. Now, the Evan Ingram situation doesn't appear to be too dire. Supposedly he is, even if he hasn't signed his deal, they are expecting him to show up to camp and participate and hash something out. So most likely,
the tight end, you better sign.
Yeah, right.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, especially him, because before last season, he was more bust than he was anything else. So,
yeah,
he showed up finally and was on my fantasy team, and I appreciated him showing up finally.
I had him on several teams as well. Yes.
Okay, so, but that doesn't mean that you're a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. So, if they're paying you top levels of tight end money, get it while you can. That's right. What I kind of look at it for him. That's a little different than these other guys.
I mean, last year's tight end 5. I mean, but again, I think a big portion of that was, playing with Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence's massive jump between year 1 and year 2. Thank you, Doug Peterson, and thank you for getting rid of Urban Meyer.
Certain coaches can stay nameless and stay out of the news, please.
Yep, stay away from the steakhouse. If you're an NFL coach. But yeah, I think a big part of that was playing with Trevor Lawrence. So yeah, I don't know that Evan Ingram is going to have a giant market if he, and I don't think he has a ton of leverage. I mean, they don't have a real great, tight end room necessarily there. It's not like they're not flush with resources at the position. It's not the receiving core by any means. But, again, yeah, he's not. And at this point, a lot of teams, most teams are pretty well set in terms of
especially after this last draft where you had 300 tight ends in it. So everybody has their tight end now.
So for fantasy purposes, I fully expect Evan Ingram to be there. They fully expect. I mean, I'm not the one breaking insider news right now, but I think we all fully expect that Evan Ingram will be on the Jaguars and he'll be signed. However much money he gets is his deal and the team's deal. But you can expect him there. You can expect him in camp. You can expect him playing. You can expect another as sure a thing as anything is in the tight end world. You can probably expect another top 10 type season from.
There's no discount when it comes to him this year.
No,
I got him off the waiver wire, which there's zero chance that's happening.
That's the only way I had him last year. I didn't draft him at all. I remain not an Evan Ingram fan necessarily, but as you said, I mean, he hadn't done a whole lot in the several years previous to that, injury wise and production wise.
I don't know if I'll say I'm an Evan Ingram fan, but like I said, I got him on my team and he's really turned it on coming down the stretch and into the fantasy playoffs. So
yeah. I'm much more.
I was in a position to draft him. I would do that.
I'm much more on board with him this year. Yeah, I'm not Evan Ingram averse as I had been in previous years.
No, I would have nothing whatsoever to do with him before last year.
Now you can debate whether or not he will be quite as effective this year.
Yeah,
with the addition of Calvin Ridley, with the idea that the rest of the league,
and they've got
knows now that he's still Evan Ingram
in that Jaguars room, which are a lot of them are pretty good. So that is a debate that certainly you could have.
Right.
And, but still, and I probably wouldn't take him as early as he's going off the draft board this year. But if he was there maybe a little bit later, I could see it happening.
Now, the one thing to say about him in terms of his effectiveness last season wasn't necessary. He is not Dawson Knox or Robert Tonyan, where all of their value comes from how many red zone looks do they get, and if they don't get red zone looks, they don't count. Evan Ingram, I mean, he was way behind in terms of tight end rankings and in terms of red zone targets. He only had 9 red zone targets last season. He's a guy that they look to between the 20s. He's a guy they look to all over the field. So if you're going to be afraid that, like, say Calvin Ridley's going to come in and steal his red zone looks,
he
wasn't necessarily getting them to begin with. So his value last season as a top 5 tight end. So as a top 10 tight end coming into this season for what we expect, his value doesn't come from red zone looks that will now suddenly be usurped by the returning Calvin Ridley. So I'm not worried about him that way, but we all expect him to be there. Engram is not one of the guys to worry about tomorrow.
No.
The guys to worry about tomorrow.
Barkley is a dude to be concerned about, most definitely, because he could miss games.
This is one that has come out, and just the longer it goes on, the more we think, oh yeah, that'll resolve itself, and it's like the less resolved this situation seems to be getting. We've talked about it again ad nauseum. We've got other guys that we'll talk about, mention here in a few minutes, that are affected by this, but the running back, the economics of the running back position seems like there's been this giant like pendulum swing paradigm shift where not only are they being devalued in that, monetarily, but just like priority wise in any way, shape, or form. You had, Austin Eckler wanted to get traded this offseason. Again, one of the top offensive weapons in all of football, regardless of position.
Right. And nobody was beating down his door.
Nobody cared. And it was, now I don't know what, if anything, the Chargers were asking from people necessarily, but I mean, yeah,
which
like
I'm
there
sure
was,
they were asking for him like he was the top of the player pyramid.
yeah, and they should. He's important to what they do. He's a bedrock piece of their organization. But there was no interest, and there's still Dalvin Cook hasn't signed. That's not news. Leonard Fournette hasn't signed. That's not news. Kareem Hunt hasn't signed. That's not news. Ezekiel Elliott hasn't signed. It just hasn't happened. But Barkley here is pushing for some money and pushing to get a new deal with the Giants that's up to his liking. And it's just not happening. And right now there's real talk anyway, that he could actually miss not just like camp time, but game time.
Games. And it's starting to look a lot like Emmitt Smith back in the day.
Right.
When he was the Cowboys, of course, and he didn't have a deal, and he sat out for 2 games.
Right.
Before the Cowboys gave him what he wanted. Of course, the Cowboys lost both of those games, and then they were like, "Oh,
that'll make you rethink some things." Yeah, that'll make you rethink some things.
He got into camp, and they went on to win the Super Bowl that year. So,
yeah,
so just goes to show you can lose a couple games and be okay, but you got to have your top player in camp or on the team before you can drive.
If you could pull a Super Bowl out of that situation, no harm, no foul on either side. Everybody's hugging in the locker room with champagne all over. But
right, Barkley's not in that locker room. There's going to be no champagne going on.
So there's 2 things to consider here with Barkley. I mean, so and I want to get your thoughts on what are your thoughts on Barkley and the contract situation on the one hand, and on the other hand, how does this make you view him? Or are you worried at all about drafting Saquon Barkley as right now he's going as a running back 1, not the running back 1, but a running back 1 right now? Are you excited about spending that kind of draft capital on a guy who we don't know if you're going to have for all 17 weeks of your fantasy season?
No, unlike when I was talking about Dalvin Cook last week, when I was like, yeah, I'll certainly take him. Yeah. If this is not resolved, but by the time I'm doing my drafts, you mentioned that you're doing several right now, so you've got to make a decision. And if I have to make a decision now in the first round, I am not taking Saquon Barkley. There are too many questions there. And your first round, we'll get into that in a minute about your draft strategy. But if any player I'm taking in the first round has to have a very high floor before I'll even consider doing that. So I'm not touching at the present minute Saquon Barkley at all.
Well, no, yeah, we've said before, you don't win your fantasy championship in round 1, but you can lose it. Unfortunately, we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen before with Saquon.
That's right.
Not due to economics, but due to health.
Especially if I were him, I'd probably sign the deal and then blow the doors off the place one more time, and then get the contract, because you still got to answer questions. Are you going to stay healthy? Because he has not been.
No.
So, and you've got to take all into account if you're drafting him. Is he going to be on the field even? And what about his health? And if he misses camp, which I guess today is not that big a deal because you're not playing in games if you're, a tier 1 player anyway, but still you get some, reps in and all that. And so if he were to come in, let's say 2 games in and be completely cold, I don't think that's productive at all. I wouldn't like that at all.
No, last season was his first, essentially his first full season since his rookie year, and that rookie year was absolutely phenomenal. He scored almost 400 points.
Definitely blew the doors off the place. So,
but he hasn't seen near that level of receiving usage since then. He hasn't seen near that level of health since then.
And on the Giants with no wide receivers, that is got to be a concern. It's not like they've got the best wide receiver room, or even the 15th or the 20th best wide receiver, or 25th maybe.
They've got a giant squad of car salesmen.
That's a concern.
But
that's right.
It was his first full season. Now he did set a career high in rushing yards, but he also carried the ball 34 more times than he ever had in the past as well. He wasn't crazy efficient from that standpoint. He had 10 touchdowns too. Again, not a lot of guys are scoring 10 touchdowns, and that's nice, but you cannot count. This is another, and we could spend an entire show on this. You do not chase touchdowns though. Touchdowns are way too uncontrollable, way too difficult to predict. You cannot count on touchdowns. If he regresses to the mean at all that way, all of a sudden it doesn't look like such a great year. Now he averaged 4.4 yards a carry, which is not terrible, but it's nothing. It's nothing that a ton of other guys in the league aren't doing.
Yeah, that's right. We've talked about Algiers behind Bijan Robinson, and he averaged 4.9 yards a carry.
Yeah,
just as a reference. So 4.4, good, but it's not eye-opening. That's for sure.
Now, this is something that I've kind of mentioned before, that it's kind of something that I think it's a good idea to follow in life. The whole kind of Occam's razor or whatever idea, the whole idea that like the simplest explanation is the most likely, explanation and the most likely outcome here. So it has not gone well in the past necessarily for holdout running backs. We saw Le'Veon Bell basically blow an entire year.
Nobody even knows where he is now.
Yeah.
He could be in New Zealand for all we know.
Right. Yeah. No one has any idea.
That's another thing. If I'm Barkley, come on. You could disappear just as fast. So
he's so dang good though when he plays. And I don't want to see that for the guy. And I get that you're upset. I get if you're a running back, it's kind of a tough time to like be in the locker. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know that they're hearing this in the locker room or not, but when the other guys on the team are all signing giant mega year and mega million contracts, and you're having to settle for 1 year pacts and 2 year pacts and signing the franchise tag and still not being happy with how much you're making based on the role that you have on the team and the pounding.
You could be Dalvin Cook and be on the street.
I get it. I get that they're not happy with their situation, but at the same time, if you want to play and you want to get paid at all,
right?
Get there.
You got to get the going rate, and the going rate's not what it was. Even I'd say 3 years ago.
I still think that the most likely scenario that happens is that they figure something out. He gets in camp and that he's on the field week one.
Because if he's not there, their giant offense goes completely.
Yeah, Gary Brightwell and Matt Breida don't scare anybody. Eric Gray, who they drafted this year, does not scare anybody in terms of their backfield.
He doesn't have somebody behind him like some of these other running backs, like Algiers, I just mentioned.
There's no Algier. There's no A.J. Dillon behind him.
Charbonneau in Seattle or wherever else you want to turn, where there's somebody that's could step in. Giants don't have that.
No. So, I mean, he's the guy. They need him on the field if they're going to be successful, and he needs to get there.
And
he doesn't need to necessarily be in camp.
Right. And they're coming off the season where they were successful. They made the playoffs. They actually won a road playoff game.
They've got some expectations this year. Yeah. Like they're not.
And all those expectations definitely crater if Saquon Barkley is not in camp and not playing as well as Saquon Barkley can play.
In terms of fantasy value, in terms of how we treat this for fantasy, I still think that the most likely scenario is that something happens, he gets something worked out, and he's on the field week 1. Based on that, based on what we know about their receiving core, they did bring in Darren Waller, but Darren Waller will essentially just be their top receiver now. So, I mean, treat that how you will.
And we could like him, but let's not play like he's Travis Kelce.
Yeah, right. But and we'll talk about him in a second here too. But no, in terms of how we treat this for fantasy, I'm not worried about Saquon Barkley. I agree with you. I don't know that I'm spending necessarily first round draft capital on him this year.
Where, especially if you're in a larger league, even in a 10-man league, that's probably where about 10 is where I see him coming off the board anyway.
And a lot of that depends on your league dynamic.
He's going in the first round. So
a lot of that depends on your league dynamic. Because if you've got one of these leagues where guys are still locked into the whole idea of running back early, if they're following the recent trend of more receivers early, but either way, you're talking about having to take Saquon as a top 10 running back. I have no problem taking him as a top 10 running back. I don't know that I want to spend my first round capital on him like that, but we'll see.
Right.
Josh Jacobs, again, as another guy who was a great find for people last year.
Probably a second round guy.
Yeah.
You can get him in the second round.
I mean, this is a guy who was, the number 3 overall, running back last season, came out of nowhere
this year, so he's not rushing for 248 yards or whatever that was.
yeah, and he's probably not carrying the ball 340 times again. But either way, this is another guy that we want to see on the field, fantasy wise.
Right.
I'm not as bullish on Josh Jacobs as a player as I am on Barkley.
No, I could be, but I've talked about their schedule before, and the Raiders' offense is not getting, they're not going down the fast track in their first couple of games.
No.
So I'm really concerned about Josh Jacobs in those first couple. If you could survive that, might be all right. But playing in Denver, playing in Denver is their first game, and then playing in Buffalo is their second game. That's not a recipe for success. So I like him as a player a lot, even though he plays for the Raiders, who I'd pretty much rather, jump off a building than like.
Right.
But I can't see using a second round pick on him, given the schedule that he's going to have to face this year.
Right. I'm not big on his schedule. I'm not giant on him as a player to begin with. He had a great, phenomenal year last year. He showed that if they use him the right way, he's a very effective fantasy player. And there
are these same questions, if you'll remember about him entering last year, and he blew the doors off the place.
Right.
And so good for him. And he was an absolute value if you drafted him last year.
We have a new quarterback this year. Oh, he's a great value last year.
Value till your eyes were, coming out of your head. But this year, I don't see that value. I don't see that same value at all.
Yeah, I don't know that I want to spend the capital to get Jacobs that I'm going to have to probably spend to get him this year.
Right.
There are other
wide receiver in the first round. Him as your top running back in the second, I'm not feeling it.
Right. I'm not as high and excited about Josh Jacobs as I wish I could be about last year's running back 3. But between this contract situation, which again, I still think that something gets worked out and he's on the field week 1. I know that they're talking about holding out. I know they're talking about all that. The most likely scenarios that the guy's on the field for week 1.
And that's great. If he happens to slide a little bit, which I don't see happening at all.
If he slides.
But if he slids a little bit, slids. That's not even the word.
Slids. If he slids, if he sloods, if he drops,
Yeah, if he drops just a little bit, then I could see certainly. But
then I
don't see it happen. No one's going to let him slide that far. No one. So
right. No,
if I'm in the second round, middle of the second round, he should be a value there, but I'm not seeing it.
No, if he slides, if I did take a running back first in my first round. If I
Right,
came
well,
away
yeah.
with a CMC, if I came away with a Barkley, or
Oh yeah,
whatever,
then there's zero chance.
Yeah, but
Zero.
if he
I'm
if he
taking him in
drops,
the second. If he
if
drops,
he drops to that running back 2 range, and he's there, some say in the 3rd round, yeah,
that would be pretty hard not to do it. You might have to hold your nose, like I said, those first
right.
couple 3 games, but then you might be okay after that.
All right, we're going to take an ad read real quick here, but when we come back, we'll touch on some more news segments that are going on around the league. A couple of interesting tidbits that are happening right now in terms of player personnel and contract situations. But first, let's listen to our first ad read here from our good friends over at Manscaped.
Spring has sprung, and our friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped you tidy up all the nooks and crannies of your body's basement. But this year, Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using code BELLY20 to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. So tame your mane with the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. The sun is peeking back out, which means you'll have to show your face in the daylight again. So use the kit to make sure your scruff looks award-winning, whether you have glorious beard flow or some smooth, sleek cheeks. Save 20% off and free shipping with the code BELLY20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code BELLY20 at manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
All right. While that was going on, I am now on the clock in the FFPC league that I'm in. So luckily it's a slow draft. And again, we'll talk about that later. But get over there to manscaped.com, use that code BELLY20 and get yourself some maintenance for your face there. Smooth, sleek cheeks if you want them. Face like a baby's butt,
right.
Which that's your deal, I guess.
Yeah.
Or if you want, if you want to groom up the rest of things. All right. So a couple other issues here. I mean, hey, the Bills are still in on DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, great. Move on. Nobody cares about that. We've talked about that enough. Until there's something to talk about, there's nothing to talk about.
We first talked about this and we were kind of like, oh yeah, this is going to be interesting. But here we are 6 weeks later and nothing's happened and no one's caring if anything happens with him or not.
Right. So nobody signed him. We said nobody signed any of the other running backs that are out there
right now.
But somebody who did get signed this week and did sign this week, Joe Mixon, signed an extension with the Cincinnati Bengals. Reworked his contract essentially is what it breaks down to. He took a big pay cut for the next 2 years. He took here's a running back who, and again, I'm not necessarily speculating on anything. I wasn't in the room for negotiations or whatever, but here's a guy who has had some trouble just this offseason, has had trouble in the past off the field. So this is a guy whose situation is tenuous at best sometimes anyway, and has not necessarily proven himself to be overly reliable as an employee of the Cincinnati Bengals. On top of that, he was not a very efficient runner last year, and you can debate whether that was him aging or whether that's the offensive line or what have you, scheme, whatever. But the fact remains, off-field issues and not very efficient last season, and aging, meaning read that as getting more expensive at a position that of any of them is decidedly getting younger and less paid. Did he read the writing on the wall for that? Say, you know what? I got a pretty damn good thing going here. These guys put up with me.
Yeah.
We are right on the doorstep of a Super Bowl. Literally, they're on the doorstep of a Super Bowl. They've been to the championship game here 2 years, and they were the runners up. They lost the game 2 years ago. Did he read the writing on the wall and sign this? Or I mean, this was just business as usual, and they move on. But he took a big pay cut. Looks like he'll probably be around for this year and next year. So this is a team that's got some other extensions coming up. They're in negotiations right now with T. Higgins and some other guys on their teams, because this was T. Higgins last year as a rookie contract. They've got a mega extension, a planet busting extension coming up for both Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase if they want to keep those two guys around. And why the hell would you not want to keep those two guys around, Burrow especially? So Joe Mixon's extension here, I mean, you have to look at that in the context of bringing these other guys back, trying to keep the band together for a win now franchise. There was some buzz around Chase Brown from Illinois when they drafted him in the draft here this offseason, because they don't have a whole spectacular run of guys behind him. Chris Evans and Travion Williams, the same two guys that have been there and the same two guys that have never seen the field, and we don't care. But Samaje Perine signs in Denver, so there is an opening right now for a guy who is both the immediate handcuff to Joe Mixon,
right, and the guy that can catch the football out of the backfield.
And a guy who can catch the football out of the backfield. That's the thing. Joe Mixon, volume-wise, because of his volume, Joe Mixon was again a top 10 fantasy running back last season, but it was all volume. Right. Like I said, he had the lowest yards per carry average and the fewest rushing yards of anybody in the top 10 running backs. And that includes Austin Eckler, who did most of his damage in theory, catching the ball, or a lot of his damage catching the ball. Does this draw you back on the idea of drafting Chase Brown in your rookie drafts? Does this excite you any more than, does this actually make you, excited about drafting Joe Mixon? How does this Joe Mixon signing news affect your views of the Cincinnati running back situation?
Well, I don't know about signing the deal, but when it comes to value, because you can get Joe Mixon, if you're in a 10-man league, you can get him in the 4th round. And so that represents major, potential reward for getting him later in the draft. And so if I'm in the 4th round, and assuming that he, all these off-field issues that you talked about a moment ago don't affect him this year, I will take him in the 4th round and be happy about it. And regardless of what I've done in the first 3 rounds, but I would be happy with him as a 4th round, even a 3rd round. If you're in a 12-man league, I could see him going up.
They are intact as an offense from last season.
That's
they are
right.
bringing back. They are bringing back, and they've actually again tried to improve their offensive line standing. Joe Mixon is a guy who, he was very inefficient last season in terms of the other top 10 running backs, but he wasn't wildly inefficient vis-a-vis his career numbers. He only averages 4.0 yards per rush for his career anyway. 3.9 was not like he had some crazy down year last year. He just didn't have the volume. He didn't have almost 300 touches like he has in the past, or almost 300 touches. He scored 7 touchdowns. Again, not wildly out of line with what he's done in his career. He's got 40 touchdowns in 6 years.
It's not like these other guys that, you talk about regressing to the main. Well, that is the main for him. So
he's played 6 years. He's got 40 touchdowns. He averages almost 7 touchdowns a season. That's rushing the football.
Right. And,
last year was not out of character for him.
Yeah. You're not as concerned about whether he's efficient. You're just concerned about the production aspect out of that. What does it matter if you're getting, let's say, 18 fantasy points or 20 or whatever it is, and it takes him more carries than the other guys? Who cares?
You don't care how many carries it takes him to get there.
No, you don't care.
You care at the end of the I guess it's 1:00 Eastern, but the noon window for my time. Yeah, at the end of the noon window, has he given you more points than other people's running backs? I don't care how he got them. I don't care if he got 6 touchdowns just falling in from the 1-inch line. I don't care if he caught 47 passes and set an all-time NFL record. I don't care how he did it.
No.
And Joe Mixon has always been the epitome of a volume running back.
Not so much in fantasy football, fantasy baseball. People get tripped up with stats and all this stuff, and they don't look at what are the end results.
Bottom line of the points.
That's right.
Bottom line of the points.
Bottom
I don't care
line is the points, and that's it. And as a 3rd or 4th round pick, I will, unless he's suspended, which I don't see happening here, at least not this year. But if he's on the field, I'm taking him in the 3rd or 4th round. There's
This
no
guy
doubt in
doesn't
my
hit
mind.
any home runs, like you said, basically. This guy doesn't hit any home runs. Yeah,
Well,
but
yeah,
but
Luis
he hits.
Arias for the Miami Marlins doesn't hit home runs either, but he is one of the players you would
If you're going
certainly
to hit
want on your
almost
team.
400, yeah, and if you're going to score runs, you're going to steal bases, you're not going to strike out. I don't care how you got your points. Great. Hey,
No.
a 2 for 4 day with a stolen base and a run scored is as good as
That's
Aaron
right.
Judge
That's
going
right.
and popping a solo home run every other
Right.
day.
And in fantasy football, we're not in cats leagues. So
Yeah.
forget all that. And
You don't
and
care
just
how the guy
look
gets
at
the points.
end result. And I like his end result. I will take him certainly.
In fact, there's something more comforting and there's something actually a lot more predictable about a guy like Joe Mixon when you know that he's just the guy, he's just going to get the carries, and the carries are what matters. What you don't want, I would rather have that guy. I would rather have the possession receiver who I know is going to catch 5 balls for 60, 70 yards every week and then is going to fall into a touchdown every 2 or 3 games. I would rather have that guy than Deshaun Jackson. And I've ripped on him and used his name before, but I'll do it again. I love you, Deshaun. I'm sure you're a good person and your mom loves you. But I would rather have that than Deshaun Jackson, who most weeks is going to maybe get me 2 catches for 30 yards, maybe.
That's right. He'll give you 6 fantasy points.
And then two, 3 times a
sudden,
year, he's going to catch a 75-yard touchdown.
Right. And then there's your 28 fantasy points.
You have no idea when that's going to happen. Best ball?
No.
Great. I'll take Deshaun Jackson. But in most fantasy formats, I would rather have that guy that's steady. And Joe Mixon has always been a volume guy. He's always been a steady guy. And so I'm fine with that.
And he's on an offense, as you said, is one of the great offenses in football. So
right now it is, sure enough.
Right now it is. Burrow's there. They got the receivers there. And if they could just get their offensive line straight, then, but we'll deal with what is. But what is he's a quality running back. And we're going to talk strategy in a minute, but if you look at most drafts in the 3rd and 4th round, there are running backs available. So you don't have to blow your wad, so to speak, in the 1st round on a Saquon Barkley if you don't have to, and still get a quality running back later in the draft.
Listen, if I can take some top guys at other positions, if I can grab one of those high-end quarterbacks, Mahomes, an Allen, a Hurts, Burrow, maybe even, who knows, but if I can grab one of those top 3 quarterbacks in the first, like say 3 rounds, yeah, and in my 1st round I can get a Porsche of a receiver,
right, depending on where
Jamar
you're
Chase, Cooper Kupp, a Tyreek Hill kind of thing,
even Travis Kelce,
and I can pick up Joe Mixon in the 4th round.
You're set at running back.
You've got a top 10 running back that you got at the 4th round.
That's right.
If you're in a like I always kind of look at things ranking wise this way. And again, this kind of ties in a little bit to strategy, but if there's 12 guys in your league, 12 people in your league, it's a 12-team league, 10-team league, 12-team league, 14-team league. You can kind of break down positions then by those groupings. So in a 10-team league, the top 10 running backs are number 1 running backs. And ideally, you have at least one of those guys. And then running backs 11 through 20 are running back 2s. And ideally, everybody has at least one of those guys, right? Like ideally, everybody's got a running back 1, a running back 2, in terms of parity and in terms of, and we know that's not how it works, but if you can get yourself a top 10 running back without having to spend crazy draft capital on it,
that's right.
You've done your job and you've returned value.
You return the value and results.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm fine. I'm happy about the Joe Mixon thing. It makes me fade Chase Brown a little bit in my rookie drafts. I actually had him. Yeah, I was kind of high on him because I don't think that Joe Mixon is long term for the Bengals, but he looks like he's at least the next 2-year term.
That's right. Since he went ahead and stepped back and saved some money for the Bengals, then that means he'll be there for the next 2 years. As you said.
Chase Brown was a speculative ad for me based on the idea that maybe Mixon wouldn't be around next year. Or maybe he wouldn't even be around this year. Maybe he'd get cut. He's going to be around this year. Chase Brown was a speculative ad for me anyway.
Getting cut was a topic of discussion.
I think
anymore.
Brown. No, yeah, that was definitely it was a very real possibility based on his price tag, and like we just said, they've got all this money coming up. They have to spend to keep their franchise quarterback and one of the top 2 receivers in the entire league.
Right.
So they've got money they have to spend that they can't be plugging into an aging volume running back. But Chase Brown, I think, is the handcuff. I think he's the handcuff of choice. I like him better than Chris Evans. I like him better than Travion Williams. Sorry, guys, I just do. But
Your mom
it does
still
make
loves
me.
you guys, though.
Yeah, I don't. He's not quite the speculative ad that he was for me, say, a week ago.
Right.
Let's real quick here. Let's take our second ad read, and we'll come back on the other side. Let's jump into this draft talk here and this actual, like, how do we conduct ourselves during drafts? But here, first off, we're going to hear from our friend Ryan telling us all about the folks at SeatGeek.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan from No Credentials Required to talk to you about one of our newest partners at Belly Up Sports, SeatGeek. Yeah, live sports is great on television, but the feeling of being at the arena is a priceless experience. That's why our friends at SeatGeek are there to help you find the best tickets at the best prices. Not only can you get tickets to sporting events, but you can also get tickets to concerts, comedy shows, musicals, and more. Search for your desired event now at SeatGeek.com, enter promo code BellyUpSports at checkout, and you save $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek. Life's an event. We have the tickets.
All right, we are back. I am kind of back. I'm, like I said, trying to figure out I'm trying to draft in the FFPC here, and I want to make sure that I make a good one because it's the FFPC.
Yeah, I was talking about heat domes a moment ago, but now it is downpouring rain. So
really,
we just we get it here in Texas.
And some of that north, man.
So
they need it.
It might be on its way. So just be ready.
You know what? We were just talking about this dude, and he is top of the board right now. And honestly, I don't like where the receivers are at right now. I think I can wait 13 more picks and grab a receiver. We are going to take Joe Mixon in the FFPC.
Remember a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about best ball, and then we got Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Joe Mixon as our stack.
Yeah,
that works all day long. Especially
here we go. We have a Joe Mixon sighting. So far through 4 rounds of the FFPC, I have Patrick Mahomes, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, and Tyreek Hill. So I'm feeling okay about that squad right now, but I need to hammer away on some receivers probably here, unless something crazy happens and I get some great value somewhere else.
There are receivers later also that could return some significant value.
Yeah, there's some. I don't want to give everything away here, but I right now I've got an FFPC slow draft going on. I've got, I think, 3 slow drafts going on Underdog. One of those is a Scott Fishbowl mirror or a satellite tournament. One of those is in the what I got? I am all over the place for drafts right now. But yeah, I've got and on DraftKings, I've got their Best Ball Mania going on. I've got all that going on. But then I finally started doing some rookie drafts in some of my dynasty leagues. So I've got that going on as well right now. I've got
the dynasty, rookie drafts and dynasty in both the leagues I'm in was done 2 weeks after the draft.
Well, we had to wait and fill an orphan, and somebody finally jumped on it. But and then I have an actual Scott Fishbowl mirror league that started drafting just this morning. I won't be up until pick 7 or 8, and that's a slow draft, so I've got some time here today. But yeah, I've been my phone's been going like every few minutes. It's been buzzing like, oh, you're on the clock in a different draft, and my wife's like, what's going on with you? Sorry, deal with it. I got stuff going on, hon. My wife, I love my wife, love my kids, love my family very, very much. Obviously, that's why I'm working hard here.
That's right.
But my wife is very much a busy summer type like parent. We got to be doing stuff with the kids all the time, and I love being with my kids. So why not? But like sometimes my idea of what I want to do with my kids is just like, yeah, let's just go outside and let them ride their bikes around in the yard and dink around and run around barefoot and and if they want to play baseball, I'll throw it to them, whatever. But And my wife has a really busy schedule because she's a doctor, so she has very limited time off. And when she's has time off, she wants to spend it with her boys and with her family. But it means that like every time that like there's a book, a book giveaway 6 counties over at the small town library for kids or whatever, we've got to pack them up, head over and do that. Or if the little sisters of the perpetually poor are having a bake sale and there's going to be a 3rd string clown handing out, bouncy balls, we got to take the boys to that. So she always has something planned, and it's always fun. It's always great for the boys, but it just means it's really packed. It's really busy. It's like run. So, sometimes what we're doing as a family conflicts with that. And sometimes I just got to put the phone away, but that leads us into.
So that's where the slow drafts are definitely an advantage for you.
The slow drafts are an advantage, but it leads us into our talk about draft etiquette here and how we conduct ourselves during, not just strategy wise, but etiquette wise during drafts. Okay. Now we've talked about, you just brought up the concept of slow drafts. And for those who haven't done a slow draft before, because they're catching on,
which I'd never done that before I got involved with Belly Up.
Right.
Never heard of the concept.
Well, a lot of people haven't. If you're not deep into the fantasy football world, if all you've done is your home draft with your buddies, or you're in 2-3 leagues,
right? If you're in a dynasty league, then slow drafts make sense.
Yeah, if you're in a work league, and you got a league with your buddies, and you guys and you plan on getting together every year, and that, you probably haven't heard of this. But if you're in especially public dynasty leagues, or
if you're in a dynasty league, you know what we're talking about.
Or if you're in a league where you guys are spread out all over the,
right. If you're, talking with a guy in Canada,
right. Yeah.
Right. Per se, or one league I was in was started by a guy in England, and they're 6 hours ahead.
They watch it
East
over
Coast
there.
time, so that's 7 hours ahead of me. So he starts the draft at 9:00 in the morning. It's middle of the night here.
Yeah, everybody else is asleep. You got to, and that's a tricky thing, but that's where, like you said, the idea of the slow draft comes in. The idea of a slow draft, for those who haven't heard about it or who haven't participated in one, a slow draft is a draft where it's online, exclusively online, but you have 8 hours, typically 8. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's less. If it's getting close to the season, they shorten it up.
Right. It stops in the middle of the night. So
yeah. So you have 8 hours to make your pick, or 6 hours to make your pick. You have an allotted amount of time to make your pick. If you make your pick in the first 30 seconds, great. If you make it in the last 30 seconds, and we've all had to wait 7 hours, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds for it, great. That's your prerogative. That's your right. But as soon as you make your pick, then the next guy's on the clock for his 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever. And like Kevin just mentioned, in the middle of the night, typically, and it may not be the middle of the night where you are, if you're in a completely different continent, but basically over here, there's only 3 hour, 4 hour difference
in Nairobi or somewhere like that. So
typically they'll shut down around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, at night for say 6, 7, 8 hours. That way, for the most part, everybody should be awake during the times that the draft is running. It's not fair for a guy to make his pick at 7:30 at night. Your bedtime is 10 o'clock or whatever. So you've already been on the clock for 2.5 hours, whether you knew it or not. And then the clock runs out while you're sleeping. You wake up at 7 o'clock the next morning, even 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and find that your clock ran out. That's not fair.
Yeah.
So that's not how they operate.
And it picked somebody that's injured.
Right. Yeah. Right. And then it auto drafted you. Yeah. It auto drafted you someone who's holding out.
Who's going to be out for 6 weeks.
Or not signed yet. You got Ezekiel Elliott because he was next up on the queue on the site that you were watching. So that's what a slow draft is. Okay. But there's some etiquette to follow, and there's some ways to conduct yourself when you're in a slow draft. Now, how many slow drafts have you personally, or how much experience slow drafting do you have personally, Kevin?
I'm in 2 dynasty leagues. So I have done slow drafts now, I'm going to say, for the last couple of years. And if you're going to be doing a slow draft, then you need to make sure everyone is aware that you're doing a slow draft. So, you know what I'm saying? Because like last year, all of a sudden, we're doing a draft, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, and I'm next up. I'm like, are you going to pick at some point, or what's going on here?
Yeah.
So make sure everyone is well aware of what's going on and all that. And just because you have 8 hours doesn't mean you have to take all 8 hours.
And that's a key. Kevin just brought up, one of the main core issues with slow drafts is that, if people aren't paying attention, and hey, we've all got lives going on. Not everybody has the ability to sit glued to their cell phone or glued to their computer at 10:30 in the morning on a Tuesday.
On your phone while you're at work is not generally encouraged.
In the middle of the work day, in the middle of a family day, middle of whatever.
Right, that's fine.
We all have lives going on.
That's what it's for.
At a live draft, when you know it's going to take several hours, it's an event you planned for. You planned to be there, do it. Everybody's hammering away on it. That's one thing. But when it's a slow draft, it's meant to allow us to live our lives while we draft, but still make progress on a draft.
That's right.
But part of the issue is okay. Oh, I'm up in 2 picks. Okay, well, those 2 picks might not happen until like tomorrow night, dude. You depending on how long the guys take. You might get through 6 picks in a day. You might get through 3 rounds in a day. It's just all about what's going on, the time frame, and are guys and girls paying attention there. So one of the things etiquette-wise in a slow draft is to always make sure that you are ready, that you know who you want to draft, and you don't take all of that time. One of the cool things about a slow draft is that 8 hour, 6 hour, whatever time limit gives you time to negotiate in draft. If you want to trade back, if you want to trade up.
Which I have done. I did it this year.
Everybody has. Yep.
I did it this year where I traded a pick and got, players, or I traded players and got a pick, or both. You've got time to do that.
And that's awesome.
And that is awesome. Whereas if you're on the clock for a minute and a half,
30-second clock or whatever. Yeah. Like there's no time. But then that's fun. And it means that trades can happen. And actually, I find tend to happen much more in terms of in draft trades. They tend to happen much more during slow drafts, regardless of the format.
Right. Because you can look at whoever's
on
the clock. You can look at their team and see oh man, he's got this guy. I'd like to have him. He has this need. So let me go ahead and I'm going to say, okay, hey, I've got this guy. How about I get this pick that you're on right now and this, and you can get it done.
And everybody understands that's part of the slow draft.
And there are guys that in a 6-round draft that might have 10 picks.
Right. Yeah. Or they might have 0 and they might trade in and end up with 4.
I have not seen 0. There was
I've seen plenty of guys
I had 3 picks, maybe 4, like that. But hey, I went into it and did some trades, and I'm not a big trade guy.
Oh yeah, but
in the slow draft, that's the only time really in all the fantasy worlds throughout the universe that I have actively done trades is in the slow draft process.
And the format lends itself to that, and it's fun, it's nice. And I've seen guys that had 0 picks coming in because they traded them all away, come out of the draft with 3-4 picks because they were able to negotiate in draft. But the etiquette, now to move to the etiquette and strategy part of things here, the thing to do is to make it known whether you're open to trading your pick away or trading for a pick or whatever. Make it known and make it known early, and then get it done. Give it a reasonable amount of time. If you're negotiating about picks and it takes you an hour, hour and a half to make your pick, everybody understands that, and that's fine. What happens is that some guys take advantage of the 8-hour clock.
Right, and they're negotiating for 7.5.
They're either negotiating for forever when they're,
and then they don't make a trade whatsoever and wind up making a pick.
Listen, the difference between this guy's 2025 3rd-round pick and this guy's 2025 3rd-round pick are unknowable right now. You can make educated guesses, but really, you're going to hold the rest of us up for literally the entire day for that difference. Make it known that you're willing to deal, and then set yourself a time frame and announce that. Use that draft chat. In slow drafts, the draft chat, however your league runs a
That's right.
group chat, in slow drafts, the draft chat is a key element in terms of keeping things moving and in terms of keeping, everybody informed as to what you're doing, so that if you are negotiating, everybody's not like, what the flip? Let's get going, dude. If they know you're negotiating, okay, everybody's more likely to back off, give you an hour, give you an hour and a half, whatever. Where the problem runs in slow drafts is when guys take the 7 hours and 45 minutes of an 8-hour clock just because they can. They're waiting for news to break, or, well, I wonder if somebody will get traded today, or I wonder if this will happen, or I really want to try and research and figure out if this. Do your research coming into the draft, which is not necessarily slow draft specific. Do your research ahead of time, and then be appreciative of everybody else's time as well. Nobody wants a 4-round rookie draft to take a month.
If you're on the clock and you know the player you want, go ahead and do it. Whether it takes you 38 seconds or whatever, especially if it's the first round.
Right.
Everybody, when you enter the first round, should have a pretty solid idea of what you want to do, especially if you're in the first, got the first pick.
And if you've got the first pick, you knew what you were doing.
Pick,
you knew what you were doing when last season ended.
7.5 hours. I'm not trying to hear that.
When there's a clear-cut number one, everybody knows Bijan's going number one. If you don't want Bijan number one, you were going to trade out, make the deal, and move on. Sorry,
Right. Yeah,
it's how heated people can get about
trade before the draft even starts.
Yep, and then everybody can move on and get it going. So, making people wait, but using that draft chat. One of the other nice things, and it's a courtesy thing, a lot of people have their notifications set up so that the app, the site, whatever, will give them an email, a text, a push notification, or whatever when they're on the clock or when they're mentioned in the group chat.
That's right.
So one thing you can do always is,
we'll see.
I made my pick. Yep. I made my pick. We'll see is right after me. So just in the group chat real quick. Okay. Make my pick. Click. Next thing up is at Will C on the clock. OTC, whatever.
3 letters.
Fire it off,
OTC,
and now it alerts that guy or girl or whomever that they are now up. It's a courtesy thing. It's not, if you haven't done a slow draft before and you get that, you're in draft and all of a sudden someone's like, hey, we'll see, OTC.
Yeah. Don't look
not
at it
meant
to pressuring you or anything like that. It's just, hey, you're on the clock, so proceed.
In case you didn't know. And the thing about it is
and that's easy to happen when, let's say, one guy takes 6 hours.
Everybody kind of goes about their lives.
And the next 3 take a minute and a half. Then all of a sudden you're on the clock. But you're, at work or you're driving or whatever it is you're doing. And you don't think that the clock's coming around that fast. All of a sudden, boom, there it is.
Or the same dude. Yeah. Or the same dude had 2-3 picks in a row. Didn't pick for the first 4 hours of draft slot 1, but all of a sudden, checks his phone and realizes he's got to do 2 draft and makes his picks right away. And all of a sudden we've jumped forward 2-3 slots.
Right.
So if you're in a slow draft and you get a message on your phone that says, hey, you're on the clock now, bud, it isn't meant to be a kick in the shins so much as just a gentle reminder to help keep things moving so that everybody's time is appreciated.
Right.
Those are some of the main etiquette things in a slow draft. I advocate using that group chat to not only give guys a bump when they're on the clock, but communicate your wishes ahead of time or communicate just what's going on. If this will lead into another etiquette thing here and another conduct thing here in a second, but if hey, I'm driving right now. I'm driving from freaking Nebraska to Nevada, and I'm going to be probably out of commission for most of the next 6 hours.
6.5 hours.
If my pick comes up, I'm gone, guys. Okay. Again, you've let everybody know that ahead of time. We all know that we don't have to be glued to the draft for the next 5 hours or so.
Right. And if you're in Nebraska, I'm sure there's not a whole lot of Wi-Fi.
You're not getting a whole freaking lot of reception or anything either.
or Wyoming.
Yeah. So everybody gets that.
Places. So I can well imagine you're isolated. You got elk and moose and stuff like
yeah,
that.
and then they don't get reception. So yeah,
No, the antlers on a moose is not going to help you.
yeah, the rabbit ears don't pick up in the wild, but you've communicated that, you've been courteous. Everybody knows. Okay, I don't have to worry about it for 5 hours, to stop worrying about it and move on with my life. They can come back later, and the next guy up knows too. Even if you said you were out of commission for 5 hours and somehow you made a bathroom stop because your wife had to take a whiz at in a half hour, and you made your pick, that guy's still not screwed because he had his time too. And if you do like what Jess said, you do the on the clock, hey, I made my pick early, he's going to get a push notification anyway. So you haven't hurt anybody by communicating possible delays or possible problems. Guys, I'm at work, I'll make my pick when I can. Click, send, doom, everybody knows. But one of the other things you can, in a slow draft, in a quick draft, in a live draft, that draft queue that you always see that not everybody uses, in a live draft, that queue, the use for that queue is much different than in a slow draft. In a slow draft, that queue is very useful in that kind of circumstance. I know that I'm not going to be able to make my pick here when I'm on the clock in an hour or less, because this guy's only got an hour left to make his pick. I will be on the clock, but I will be unavailable. Listen, you're the next guy up, you're 2 guys up, whatever. You know the next 3 guys you're really considering. You're up in 3 picks. You're going to get one of these 3 guys. Set your queue with those 3 guys in the order that you want them. And if one guy goes, no big deal. When your guy comes up, you can set it to not just set the queue, but set the auto draft for that pick, and you're golden. You're good to go. Your guy comes up, your slot comes up, a few seconds go by, the auto pick kicks in. It takes the next guy that was on your list, the guy you were going to take anyway.
Right.
And we all move on. And now you don't have to worry about it for another, maybe the next day. But now everybody isn't waiting and held up on you for 8 hours because you knew you were going to be at work, knew you were going to be on the clock, knew you were going to have a choice between 2 guys, 3 guys, and chose not to act on that. Just some etiquette things there for slow draft purposes. But live draft conduct. What are some of your pet peeves in a live draft that guys do that really lessen? Do you have any pet peeves that guys do during or around live drafts that really lessen your enjoyment of the situation or of the event?
Well, I don't know if you call them a pet peeve or not, but I suppose so. But if you're involved in a league and it's a live draft and everything, and you've got 12 guys, and then the draft starts, then all of a sudden there are 10 guys.
Yep.
Right? Where'd the other 2 go? And then the auto draft kicks in, and that can throw off every last bit of strategy that you had going in, because the auto draft picks somebody, at random. And so now you thought, well, there was going to be a guy that was going to be there when you were on the clock. All of a sudden, the auto draft guy got him. So that I have not seen that a whole lot in public leagues. If you're going to be involved in that, which, I can't, there's not a lot of us that are doing that. We're all involved in leagues that are established and all that. So that's not really a big concern. But so I don't really have a whole lot of issues with any kind of drafts that I've been involved with. Just, I don't know how many times where I had a player that I wanted,
Yeah.
and then the guy right before me takes him.
Sniped.
Yep.
That happens.
Right. And which happens. It happens all the time. And so
we've all had it done.
That's not a pet peeve. That's just the way
it's just
things shake out.
Yeah.
But when you're doing something like that happens, you got to be able to pivot, and because the draft is not going to go the way, no matter how much planning you put into it, it's not going to
not.
go the
Yeah,
way.
it's going to be
not.
different.
It's
You
not
just
going to go
touched
the way
on
you
two.
thought.
You just touched on my top two things. You just touched on my top two things, and we'll real quick here. A, show up on time.
Right.
I don't
Be
care
there
if
on
it's a
time.
live draft. I don't care if it's a live draft and you're planning on being there. Show up on time. Be ready to go.
time.
If it says the draft is at 12, the guy
That's
doesn't
right.
expect you to be there at 12. He expects you to be there an hour beforehand, helping grill, drinking beer, dinking around with everybody, so we can all have our butts in seats at 12 and we're ready to go. If you're remote, if you've got to be doing it online or whatever, be ready. Like Kevin just said, be there at 12 o'clock so you're not auto drafting weirdly.
Yeah, be
and
there
we don't have to
before
listen to you
12.
whine that, oh, well, my first two picks, I didn't want those guys. Get your ass on the computer and be here
That's
on
right.
time and not worry
And
about
right. And be there so that whoever's the commissioner is not scrambling around to find out where you are, if you're coming or whatever.
I
And
am not known for
I'm
punctuality.
not a commissioner.
No, I'm
Well,
not,
I am I'm a co-commissioner in the baseball league that we're in, but I would be very, very irritated if I was a commissioner and I would have to spend all my pre-draft time
texting guys and calling guys and trying to figure
them,
no.
calling
Get your
them,
butt to
hey,
the draft, figure it
in
out.
17 minutes. Where are you? Da da da.
You didn't just find out about the draft an hour and a half ago. Okay.
No.
You don't have to jump
Right.
out of the shower and be like, oh, shit. No, just go. You knew it. You knew when it was. I am not known for punctuality in my life. I am a last minute dude. I'm a last minute guy with work, with play, with whatever else. I am, store closes at 9 o'clock. I probably better show up at 8:55. I'm that guy. I know it and I hate it.
I'm the dude that's showing
but
up
I just am.
that opens at 9 o'clock a.m.
Right. But
Okay.
for the draft, or when other people are counting on it and you've got 12
That's
other
right.
people,
Don't-
11, whatever.
Yeah,
get your
don't
butt
mess
there.
up somebody's season because you didn't show up.
And the other half of things then is show up and be prepared. Seeing these guys that show up, they don't have any rankings or whatever, or they've got 3 years ago's magazine, and they
Yeah,
hey, is this guy hurt still? Yeah,
right.
and he's been hurt, and we've all known it since May that he wasn't
Right.
going to be ready for the start of the season, but he'll be back. He's on IR, and he'll probably be back around week 6. Oh, okay. Like, how did you not know that coming in?
How
If it's a
did you
guy
not
you're
know
considering
that?
drafting at all, how did
And
you not know
How
that?
did you take, a kicker in the 10th round? How'd that happen?
Be prepared. Know what's going on.
prepared.
It's
That's
one
right.
thing if news breaks like while the draft is happening or right before
Which
the draft.
has happened.
And it happens all the
Well,
time.
Once again, in the baseball draft this past year, we were live drafting, and I think it was Vince's dad. Maybe it was last year this happened. And he drafted a guy, and then while the draft was going on, it was announced that he was hurt and gonna nothing you can do about that. But still,
Right.
So, but so like Saquon Barkley. Hopefully, when
We
you're
all know
drafting
right
that
now what's going on.
information, yeah,
Follow it.
That's right. So
Yeah.
hopefully, when your draft is what Saquon Barkley is in fact up to.
Don't show up the last week of August and have no idea whether Saquon Barkley is or isn't in camp. Just figure it out. Do your research, be prepared, show up on time. Have your own rankings. Don't expect, unless it's a convention of your league. Like my commissioner in my home league, my
so
buddy,
now
he
you're
always
onto a
hands
pet
out.
peeve. You're really you're bringing out the pet peeve right
Yeah.
here because
Good. That's
all
what we
right.
want to hear.
So you're some guy asks you or girl, as you mentioned, should I take this guy or should I take this guy?
I don't know.
Right?
Take the one I don't want you to take.
I'm not doing the research for you. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I've done my research. Please
right?
take the third
If you
string running back for this other
Hey,
team.
I'm close on this guy and this guy. I like this guy because, and I like this guy because, and I just can't seem to make up my mind. That's a lot different.
Dude, should I take James Conner or should I take
pet
Matt
peeve,
Breida?
Okay, should I take this guy or that guy, and why?
Take Matt Breida, please, because that way I'll
That's
take
right.
Connor
That's
later and
right.
actually get
So
points out on this year.
So pet peeve has arrived. Don't ask me why I should take a guy.
Do your own damned research. It's one thing to be
I'm not here to waste, research. You know this, right? It's not something that you can just boom.
And I'm not trying to cut out the idea of having banter or
of
having
course not.
discussion. I have done it before too. I'm not on the clock for 12 more picks. The guy across from me or guy next to me or whatever isn't on the clock for 11 more picks or whatever. He and I are just dinking around and we're both trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be left when I get there and where do I got to be? And yeah, discussing with each other saying, hey,
Yeah.
oh,
Just
dude, I don't
say,
know.
should I take,
I've only got
should I
one
take
running back. Do I need
George
to have?
or should I take Scott and why?
That's one thing to have that discussion. It's another thing to be on the clock and be trying to figure out if a guy is healthy, if a guy is the number 1 or the number 2 receiver on his team, if, whatever. Just do your freaking research and be on time.
Okay.
So that leads us into another question that I had, though. How do you use rankings when you're drafting? Do you personally, Kevin, do you have the same set of rankings that you use or try to use across the board?
Well,
do you tailor rankings for each draft you do? How do you conduct yourself?
You kind of have to, depending on, because not all that are the same. Like if you're in a 1 quarterback league, your rankings cannot be the same as if you were in a super flex league. So you need to be, first, as we've talked about many times, know the league you're in and the rules that they're setting. And so then you can go and do your research. Most of the leagues I'm in are in ESPN. So I use ESPN a lot. I do use Fantasy Pros and things like that. And I kind of look at what they're saying and then why they're saying it. And I will come up with my own rankings. And especially because I'm writing articles by about that point in time,
right?
About my own, I like this guy. I like this guy. I don't like this guy and why.
And I like that you said that you have to tailor your rankings for the draft that you're in. We've said before,
the platform you're using.
Know the platform, know the rules, know the scoring rules.
Right.
But then bring your rankings to the draft and have them
bring them to the draft. And one thing I will not do, I will not pay for any content. I will not do it.
You don't?
There's enough content out there that you don't have to pay for, like ESPN Plus.
If you want to put the time in,
whatsoever for me.
Put the time. If you put the time in that you should put the time in, you can find enough free content. Yeah, you're right. You can find enough
content, including stuff from our own, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody like our sports guy, department head Dan, he has a series where he talks about every team and their fantasy implications, wide receivers, quarterbacks, whatever. If you're not watching that, then you're not doing yourself any kind of service because he lays it all out there. So
you can find, if you put the time in, you can find enough research out there to put together your own rankings for everything. Right. And you need to tailor those to the specific format that you're going to be playing in.
Right.
If it's a super flex format, don't be using regular
standard, whatever it is. And then you could just put that in your search and then you'll come up with that's what I did right here. Here's my phone right here. All right.
There it is.
And I just put in certain search words and boom, there it is. Didn't pay for any of it. Appreciate it that somebody actually did that research, because I've done, my own and put it and researched it and put it in articles, and I know how much effort all that takes.
Studied about it quite a bit.
Yeah, studied about it quite a bit.
So there you have it. So
that, and I agree that you can, that you can you can find enough research everywhere. You can put your own thing together. You don't need to rely on that, but bring it in, have it, and know what you're doing. But then, use rankings that are tailored appropriate to the format that you're playing. If it's a super draft league, and we don't want to conflate rankings with ADPs. Okay. But keep in mind, ranking wise, if you're just going to use an overall ranking list, the top 200 list or whatever, that top 200 is not going to go in that order. Not everybody's going to see them in that same order. If it's a super flex league versus a one quarterback league, if it's a tight end premium league versus a PPR league versus a standard league, you need to have that understand and know that. In draft, I will have different rankings depending on what the format is, what the site is, what the whatever is. But then in draft too, then I will watch that ADP. Do you look at ADP at all to help you make decisions, or do you ignore it, or what's your thoughts on ADP real quick?
ADP, I know it's important to a lot of people. I will, of course, I'll look at that, and I'll look and see how it might work out or whatever. But when it comes to when I'm actually on the clock, then ADP really doesn't enter into it. Not really. I'm just looking at guys that I think that can help my team at that point.
Right.
Because an 80, let's say, this guy might be a running back and have this 8, but I've already taken 2 running backs before that. Or
don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
And I don't have the need. Now needs come into it a little bit later in the draft because of what you did earlier on. Because earlier you're taking the best player. Right. You think at that point, especially first 4 rounds. First 4
or 5 rounds should be BPA and just hammer.
And so ADP has I don't care about ADP at that point.
When I'm live in a draft, I will use ADP to look to help me, not to make, but to help me make the decision on whether I can afford to wait on a guy that I have targeted or not. If a guy's ADP is 79 and we're in round 2, I probably can wait on that guy at least another round or 2. I don't have to jump on my target right away. And that's an extreme case, but I'm trying to paint the picture here. I try to use that to make a decision, an educated guess on whether I can afford to wait on a guy, on a position, or whatever. If I don't like everybody that's going in this range that I've got right now, but my next pick isn't for, if I'm not on the clock for another 21 picks, okay, so I don't like the guys that are in my immediate range right here that are up or that are in my rankings right now, but can I afford to wait 21 more picks to jump on, say, this next guy? His ADP says I can, so okay, maybe I'll look somewhere else. That's the way to use that. Don't use the ADP as your ranking,
because most of the leagues I'm in are points leagues. Yeah, if not all of them. But so projections come into it a lot. Who's going to put the points up, and that's where we come into the final analysis.
Because you'll see guys that are ranked higher than another guy, but aren't projected to have as many points.
You'll see that all day long, like in ESPN leagues. They don't have a guy that's 10th, and then a guy right behind him, but he's going to score 100 points less. Yeah,
or more.
What's up with this?
In some cases, it's like, this running back is scheduled to, we have been projected for 169 points this season. And the guy behind him, the next spot down on the rankings, 12th to 13th or whatever. We have him projected 184. How the hell does that work?
Yeah.
How do you have a guy ranked lower who's going to score more points?
You need to come up with your own, well, I believe,
and I understand mathematically how it can work out. We've talked about Deshaun Jackson and going off, but for the most part,
you need to come up with your own
come up with your own rankings.
How do I? Because there are certain guys that I feel better about that are ranked lower than some other guys.
Oh, big time. And that's the whole key to find. That's the whole key to finding value, and that's the whole key to going off schedule. Yep.
If you take a guy and you like the guy, and it doesn't work, that happens. But if you wind up taking a guy just because his ADP says to, and it doesn't work out,
that's on you.
Then,
that's on you. That means you relied on everybody else and not yourself.
Right.
A couple of quick reactions real quick here. Are you a paper and pen guy live in draft, or are you a computer guy in draft?
I've tried to be like a computer guy, but I have seen where if you don't pay strict attention, then you wind up taking, let's say in fantasy baseball, you wind up taking 2 third base.
Right.
When I didn't intend to do that. So I've pretty much decided that I'm going to be both. And just jot down my own picks. And then
watching the computer. Yep.
While
I've kind of combined the two strategies personally. Yeah. I always come into a draft with an Excel sheet made up with my starting lineup, with however many roster slots we have, with how many quarterbacks and running backs, basically slots marked out for how many I want of each. And obviously that changes as the draft plays out. But I use the spreadsheet, and I'll type into the spreadsheet guys that I take. And I'll even have my picks. I'm at pick 3, I'm at pick 17, I'm at pick whatever, all the way down the line. And then I will delete those or mark them off as they come. So I'm basically using an Excel spreadsheet as my paper to take my notes. So I am using the computer. I'm using the computer as my pen and paper. So I'm kind of a hybrid of the two, but I like being able to keep my own notes. I don't want to have to just click on my roster that's in the draft room there or whatever. I want to be able to have my plan in front of me and be able to mark that up, but also be able to do what I'm, put down what I've actually done in front of me so I can read it. What's your thoughts on drinking during the draft versus not drinking during the draft, or how far you go?
Well, I'm not a big drinker guy to begin with. So I might, this is right now.
There you go.
Okay. But, so I'm going to be in complete control of my faculties while I am doing my draft, but have some fun with it. Enjoy your, we're doing all this to enjoy ourselves.
The whole point of it is to enjoy yourself. Exactly.
That's right. And so, but don't enjoy it so much where head meets floor, that sort of thing.
Strategy and etiquette in the same conversation right here. Like Kevin just said, be in control of your faculties. Have a couple if you like to have a couple with your buddies, get loose. That's the whole point of the whole thing. You waited all year for this, to hang out with your friends and talk smack and have some fun.
And be ready to talk smack, because I can bring it.
Oh yeah. But
I can bring it.
Keep yourself in control to the point that you still can make good decisions, because that's going to result in a better draft for you in terms of your quality of your team. B, it's going to result in a better draft for everybody, because nobody's going to have to be taking care of you or dealing with your loud, obnoxious ass any more than you normally are loud and obnoxious.
Right.
It's a strategy and an etiquette thing. Keep yourself in control while you're there. Once the draft hits and it's over, be smart, be safe. But if you want to have 6 more and whatever, that's on you then. But during the draft, for your own strategy,
home, that's fine. Right.
For everyone else's enjoyment, keep yourself in control.
That's right.
All right. There we go. Kevin, we're going to wrap it up here, but where can we find you this week? What do you got going on here? And how's things going?
You can always follow me at Twitter at Kevin62, WILSEA. And you can always go to the Belly Up Fantasy website. Of course, the All-Star game, baseball is over now. The second half is underway. And I have an article that I put out Friday of my fantasy second half preview. And so that's on there. And tonight, Vince and I will be discussing bold. I don't know how bold we're going to get.
Bold second half. Yeah,
bold second half fantasy predictions. So we'll see how bold we get. And talking about news and notes and things like that, and all the most important ads and drop strategies that we're going to come up with. So that's tonight at 7 Central, 8 o'clock, where time begins from a lot of our colleagues. And so that's out there. And so Belly Up Fantasy website and baseball and me go together. So just get over there.
All right, jump on over there and check that out. Yeah, and check out, like he said, check out himself and Vince on the Sports Stove tonight. You're my biggest fan right now today because I am currently beating Dale. And if I beat Dale, you've got a win pretty much locked up in your matchup. You'll be in first place all alone in the fantasy baseball league. So you're my biggest fan today. I've got about a 96-point lead right now. Which in theory should be safe, but it's happened before.
It disappeared.
Right.
Without a trace. So
yeah, all it takes is a couple of negative starts from your starting pitchers.
That would be his third straight loss after starting the season unbeaten. So
dude was on a heater, and then he's kind of dropped. But you're my biggest fan right now today, because if I win this one, I'm right back into it, and you are in first place all alone. So
I'm in first place, and
good luck to me.
Fourth is up for grabs. So
again, good luck to me. I'm fighting it out right now with Mike, the CEO, head honcho of everything that is Belly Up here. I'm fighting it out with him in terms of for that kind of that fourth spot. Top two spots looks like you and Dale have
Vince
those locked
in the
up.
Third spot.
Vince is pretty solidly in third place, and especially with the point scoring. I'm the fourth highest scoring team right now, but record wise, I've been screwed by people. Everybody scores their high score against me. So even though I've got a positive point differential on the year, I'm sitting here at 6 and 7. I got to get back to 500 here. I've got a 400 or 500 point positive differential, I think, but I've been completely the luck of the draw, like it happens in fantasy. But I'm fighting with the big head honcho for fourth place here. So let's say you're my big fan today. So cheer for me. Send good vibes my way.
Absolutely.
You guys can all find me at STT Chase FFB on the Twitter machine. Find me over at bellyupfantasysports.com. Of course, you can always find us here every Sunday at the same time, same bad channel. Wish me luck in all my ongoing, phone shuffling fantasy drafts going on here.
Yep.
But until we see everybody next week, we are going to say, hey, cheers to you. Slán Everybody
have a great day.